Hey guys, welcome to PRDN330, week number 2. The one where we talk about materials. Pretty much, mostly. This one's all going to be focused on just the first sort of segment of Keyshot, which is materials. And this is a rendering here that I put together as an example of what your homework is going to be. And I turned on some other stuff here that I'm just going to turn off for now. Basically for your assignment, and I'll kind of just get this out of the way right now, is going to be to use this perfume bottle model that I have here. I added this logo in Keyshot as the famous Arches logo from McDonald's. And I branded my fragrance as like a McDonald's fragrance sort of thing. Who knows what that'd smell like? Anyways, but the point of your assignment is going to be just to play around with materials and do some experimentation, kind of see what you can do, work out, and also to work with labels, which is what this is, and I'll explain what that is in a bit here. But yeah, let's get into it, and I'll kind of walk through what I did on this particular one as a reference, and then I'll kind of start over briefly and kind of show you how I got there. I did make some edits to this in the environment, in the camera and lighting and stuff, so I am just picky that way and I couldn't not do it. So if you do end up playing with your environment or your lighting, that's fine, but you don't need to. The main things you need to play with is your materials and do material editing. So yeah, with that, let's kind of dive into what's going on here. And I went ahead and I renamed the model and stuff, and organized it and split out and fixed a couple things that I didn't like about it. I'm using the original one here. That's the prefixed one. So yeah, it's still in whatever language. Looks like could be Japanese, Chinese. Anyways, so first off, in the scene, I had briefly talked about this last week about how the project is set up. But basically, it starts with your top level, and then it shows all of your different components here that make up this here. So you can see that each one of these is broken up. I also, like an edit that I made, for example, is I split this into 2 parts, so you can actually have this be 2 different materials. And then I also kind of fixed the way that the liquid overlaps into the glass and stuff. So there was just a couple things there. But yeah, I'll go ahead and just look at materials real quick here. And again, I'm just doing this to kind of show you what I did for this particular one, and then I'll talk through how we did it. So one of the first things is the steel on top. And I started with a base of a steel, and then I edited it through the material graph, which is kind of like this node-based material editor. I had not messed with this a lot prior to teaching this class, but I definitely should have been using it as the way in which I edited materials, because it's a much more in-depth way of actually editing a material outside of just the standard stuff that you can edit over here. That was always my frustration, was I was feeling like I was boxed in, but apparently there's this whole other thing here called a material graph where you can actually control the material. So this one is fairly basic. I left the basic steel, and all I did was just adjust the color on that to give it a different hue. The water is water. The glass, I did a few things too. And here's where I added in my logo. Again, I'll talk about all of this a little bit more in depth, but I guess I can kind of mention the way that it's working out here is you basically have your material that you're working with, that I started with. And for the surface of this material, I used an advanced material type, and then I edited this particular advanced material so that it kind of gave it like a frosted glass look by editing some of the diffuse specular ambient. And then I added this noise texture as a bump. And what bumps are, and again, I am kind of all over the place right here at the start, but we'll walk through it. But bumps are essentially what gives it what looks like that little granular texture on it there. Instead of just being smooth glass, it actually gives it some imperfections. So I actually added that texture in and produced that. And so bumps essentially give your materials what appears to be very, very small changes to the geometry. It actually alters it to appear modified in like the three-dimensional space. And I'll show some more examples of that. The texture map, this here is just the logo, and it's a PNG, so that means if you're not familiar with PNGs, you can actually create it to where there's a transparent background, and then when you bring in the logo, it's only the logo, which is what you see here. And then what I did with this is I made the label itself an actual metal to kind of give it like a metal foil sort of look, and then I assigned that to the label on this in that. The other thing I edited was like the aluminum here. I did some similar stuff. Basically added a couple different textures on the bump, and that gives it kind of just a, so it's not perfect, and it just gives it some like machining marks almost and things like that, some marks in there, and then I colored it as well to try to match it closely to that, but not quite the same, because technically these would be two different materials. Like this would be a metal foil versus this being an actual colored aluminum piece or something like that. So anyways, that's kind of how I achieved some of those different looks there. And again, I'm going to walk through this from start to finish. Hopefully I'll get a similar result. I spent several hours on this last night just trying to figure out how exactly I wanted to do this. So that way, at least when I walk through it now, I can go through it at a slightly better pace. So with that, let's go ahead and open up a new one. Discard changes. So first thing that you're going to be doing is importing in the model. So I'm just going to hit import, and I will be putting this in the content section for you to download, and just hit import. First thing you'll notice, it's sideways, and that's okay because you can adjust that. And over here on my perfume bottle, you can see that I've labeled everything and, like I said before, divided it out a little bit differently. So I'm going to click the topmost level. Then I'm going to go to position, and I'm going to grab the move tool. And the reason for this is so I can start to rotate it to see, and you can see the numbers here updating as I'm rotating it. That's so I know which direction this is, and I don't have to guess which one's which. And then I can actually just edit this to say -90. So I'm rotating it 90 degrees. Other thing I want to do is usually snap it to ground. You can click it there, snap to ground, then just hit this green check mark. So then it's placed correctly. Okay, and that's pretty much all I want to do with positioning wise. It's pretty good there, no problems. As I said before, the materials here on the left are your default starting materials. Again, I would highly recommend that you never just use a material without editing it. You should always be editing your materials, especially as you make better and better renders down the way. And for now, we are kind of just learning how to use the materials, but just understand that I'm expecting you to continue with all of the additional exercises after this to exercise the things that you learn here and be able to always be editing your materials. So you should never have stock materials. Obviously, there's a few exceptions like the water, for example. I just left that as water because it looks fine and it's not super critical. Some particular elements you can just leave stock, but for the most part, the big ticket materials that you're using that are very apparent and looked at, you should be editing. So I'm going to try to make this one similar to the other one that I was just showing just a little bit ago. And I'm going to start by using my base materials here, which you can just drag and drop as you please. You can drag them directly on to your model here, or you can drag it over to your actual scene over here on the right. I'm just going to do that drop down. And I'll grab the spray bottom there just so I've got that there. Can scroll down, grab a different color here for the collar. And for this straw, I'll probably do a plastic. So I'll just click plastic there. Plastic cloudy rough. Sounds good. Straw. For the liquid water. That's just a plain Jane one right there. That'll work. And then for the glass, just want a basic white glass. Cool. So there we go. There's the basic materials all applied. And now we're going to talk through just a little bit about how those properties work and then look into the material graph. So each material has a different set of properties here. As I click through them, you can see that it changes depending on what the material is, a different set of properties. And each one you kind of have to learn how different properties need to be adjusted. And then as well, outside of this, once you add the material graph, there's even more levels of sort of things that you can change and add and tweak, which is great. So for plastic here, for example, transmission, usually the first thing at the top is going to be some sort of way of achieving a color. So in this case, they're calling it transmission, and this is the material color achieved. And I'm also going to just go ahead and isolate just the straw there. Maybe zoom in a bit so I can see it. And we'll leave that there. I'm going to add a little bit more cloudiness to it. Usually those straws aren't perfectly see-through. Probably no roughness to this one here. How much light reflects through it, and you can see there the more that I add, the more light that's reflected, and that just looks very unrealistic. So I'm actually going to bring that down quite a bit there. Maybe not reflect so much light through it. What else we got? Yeah, roughness, not really going to adjust that. In the advanced, this has to do with the cloudiness effect. And again, had I just done normal plastic, I wouldn't have these cloudy effects, but because I did that, I've got some adjustments there. So then I'll jump over to liquid water, and let's go ahead and isolate that one so I can see it. So I'll do the liquid there. And again, color, I'll give it kind of like a champagne color there, something like that. And transparency distance, so this has to do with, defines the distance at which the material color is achieved. So if we bring that down, you can see how it affects the color there. So we're going to go ahead and leave this probably back to a little bit closer to where it was, right around there. Refractive index, this has to do with how much it's reflecting. And again, there are true material information here. So in this case, water is 1.33. So I'm going to leave it as is, so it looks like water. And we'll go ahead and leave that one as is. So these are all just basic adjustments as I'm going along. The other tabs that you can see up here, textures. I'm not going to add textures to water because it's water. And then labels, we're going to talk about those, but it's, yeah, I'll just hold off on that once I get to the label. Next thing we're going to look at is the glass basic, and I'll go ahead and turn that on here so I can see what I'm working with. And for this one, you can see here I've only got one option, which is just adjusting the color here. And so depending on what color I wanted that to be, I can add that in and change that color as I see fit. This again changes how it reflects. So you kind of have to find that balance. And in this case, it's glass, and glass has a set value of approximately 1.5. So if I leave this at 1.5, that'll give me kind of the glass look. So again, not a lot to edit here, and I want to do more to this. So how do I do that? Well, open up the material graph, and in this week's content, I am going to add in a video that explains a little bit more about this stuff. So be sure to check that out, and I'll just kind of talk about just kind of from a base level of how this is working. So basically we've got here is our glass basic white. This is the material that is being applied, and here the glass, this is what's actually giving it the color, any sort of bump or opacity that I want to add to it. So in this case I want to add a bump to this, so I'm going to right click, do a texture, and I'm going to select noise textured, and I'm going to apply that to the bump. Notice how it just kind of made that super wavy. You can see there without it, normal, they're adding it. And it almost looks like it's physically changing the object. In this case, it's not actually adding three-dimensional geometry, but it is affecting the way that light reflects off it, which gives it the appearance of kind of having that waviness. The reason it looks so odd like that is because of the scale. So when I go over here, oh, come on now, there we go. I'm going to double click it, and it'll bring up a panel here. And I could just start adjusting the slider, but it's going to have to re-render every single time, and I have no idea how big my texture is. So if I hit C, it'll actually isolate just that texture that I'm working with, and so I can see that in the simple black and white form. So I'm going to bring that down probably to 0.25, give it like a nice graininess there. Hit C to come back to normal, and then you can see there that it's now applied that sort of texture to the whole thing there. This has to do with your bump height, in which how extreme that is that it's appearing, and the magnitude of how much of the noise is happening in that texture. The colors in the texture, Keyshot recognizes black as 100% and white as 0%. So therefore, anywhere on this texture that is black is going to be a bump, and anywhere that's white, it's going to be normal. So that is kind of how that is working there. And in this case, since it's a procedural fractal sort of texture, I don't need to adjust where it's located because it's the same everywhere, which is good. That's what we want. So go back here. Yeah, that looks pretty decent there. What does it look like when I add in the liquid? Pretty hard to see through. So I might actually just raise that color up a bit more. Maybe in this case, maybe I'll make it lighter than my other one that I was doing. Sure, we'll go with something like that. Okay, so when I right click on this, there are materials, geometry, textures, animation, and utilities. These are your different nodes. Material is like glass here, and when I add in my label, I'm going to want it to be metal, so I'm just going to go ahead and add in that now. I can actually just drag that to adding a label. And if you see there, that takes over the whole thing right now because there's actually no label attached to this. So I'm going to go ahead and add in that label now. And I think I should do that over here in the material. I'll go under labels. And the way that labels work is essentially like adding a sticker or a label to it. And so I'm just going to do add label texture. I'm going to grab my PNG, and you can see there how that kind of, oh wait, I guess let's do this. You can see here when I added it in, it automatically applied a plastic material for this label because I believe that is just the default. So it adds it in like a sticker. If I want to adjust the placement of it, I just come over here, move texture, and then go ahead and turn on my translate. I'm going to kind of drag that around until it's, oops, put that back there. Nope, it just undid something else. Try that again. Move texture. Move it to the right slightly. Looks like it needs a little bit of rotating as well. I'm not really sure why. For whatever reason, it's gonna scale it down a little bit. Trying to get it to not distort so much. Just gonna go ahead and hit OK on that for now. Just see how it's doing. It's not great placement. Looks like it might need to go a little bit more to the right. I think that's okay. Now if you notice here, it's reflecting through the whole object like that. To change that, just come down to the two-sided and select that. There we go. And that should take it off the additional reflection back there. I think there's one other thing I need to do, which is the depth. Yeah, I think I need to set this to like 1 millimeter. Oh, a little bit further. A little bit further. 0.5. There we go. So set the depth to 5 there, and that'll look a little bit better there. Okay. Now again, notice that this just looks like basically exactly how that label looks, which is just yellow. There's nothing really going on with it. So to edit that, you could just be editing it here, blending it with the color, brightness, contrast, things like that. But instead, I'm going to go to the material graph here, and I'm going to delete the plastic. And instead, I'm going to drag this to the color and drag that to the label. And now you can see that it looks like a little bit more reflective. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to drag this to the bump as well to make it stand out a little bit. So like it's got a little bit of 3D properties to it. So then I'm going to edit the metal. I'm going to add some roughness to it to kind of give it that foil appearance. I can kind of zoom in to see what it's doing. More roughness. Yeah, that should do. And you'll notice here that's kind of getting like a double image. That kind of has to do with the nature of working with glass and how is like a thickness to it. I struggled with trying to figure out a way to get rid of it. There's not really like a good way that I found, at least. But if you do find a way, let me know, because I definitely would be interested in figuring that out some more. But for now, it's definitely going to have some of that additional reflection, as it were. So there, now we've got our glass. We've added in a label, as shown here. And that's something that you'll be doing in your assignment, is adding in a label. And then, of course, I'm expecting you to be doing some of this material graph editing to kind of make some edits to it as you see fit. And again, in that video, he does talk about a little bit more about what each of these, or at least what some of these utilities do and how to use them. So be sure to pay attention to that. And we'll go ahead and jump to the next material, which is going to be the anodized titanium here, which is the collar. And again, that looks super, super smooth, super perfect, and I want to change it. So basics here are, it's a metal, it's saying it's titanium, there's no roughness, it's anodized, and there is some refracting that's going on, some film that's on it, no textures, no labels, as expected. So material graph, and let's jump into the cloud library. And it will ask you to log in. If you do not have a KeyShot login, you should get one. And there we go, I'm logged in now. on here you have more stuff that you have access to. So under here, all kinds of textures, things that you can add in as new textures to add in to change things up, which is super great. There's all kinds of stuff in here that you can use. And I believe I grabbed like some rusty paint scratches or some rusty paint color. I grabbed a couple things from here, which should be located in my downloads. There you go. Yeah, so I got those two there. So what I'm going to do is drag these in as textures. And if I want to add 2 textures to the bump, because if you notice here, I can't drag 2 leaders to the same bump for some reason. What I have to actually do is I'm going to right click on this joint, go to utilities and do a bump add. And then what that will do is that'll give me a way of basically taking 2 and shoving them into the same material there. And so that's what you can see me adding there. So I'm going to just kind of position myself here a little bit better to see what I'm working on. And we'll go ahead and start with the cracked ice here. I'm going to go ahead and hit C so I can see what that looks like. I'm going to bring that width. It was actually decently sized for it. Something like that. Brightness, contrast. More contrast, less contrast. That changes with how much it affects. So I'm going to actually give it a less contrast to make it a little bit less drastic. And yeah, we'll leave that as is. And for this one here, you can see the texture. If I actually wanted to add in that rust, I could actually add in as a color to this metal the rust, and I think it'll actually come through as the color as well on this particular one. Maybe not. I feel like I had done that at one point, but anyways, go ahead and isolate that one again. See the width and the height there. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. And yeah, something like that. Just kind of interesting. Changes it up a bit, gives it some texture. Something a little bit more different. And let's see if is there any difference if I delete that? Not really. So it doesn't look like it's actually doing what I wanted it to. But that's okay. I think if I was using it as a single bump, it might do it, but I think this is affecting it. But nevertheless, we'll move on. I'm going to go ahead and hop back to this. And the metal preset is titanium. I want to be able to adjust the color. So it looks like if I do that, and then for here, I'm going to just add in a color adjust. Pop that into the color. And let's see if I can make this. Nope, we're gonna leave that black then. Try adjusting the colorize. Oh, neither of this want to adjust. Probably because of the nature of it being metal. Metal type color. There we go. This gives me the color adjustment. That works as well. So I'm gonna go ahead and try to match that other color down there a little bit better. Something like that, maybe. It's a little bit too bright for my taste. Yeah, sure, we'll go with that. So there we got the color adjusted. That looks a bit better. And we'll go ahead and call that one good for now. And then we're going to look at, let's see which one was which. The spray bottom is the aluminum rough. So that would be this one here. And again, the preset is aluminum. What I might do on this, might also make this one a color. No roughness for the time being. Let's go ahead and add a material graph. Right click, I'm going to add a texture. I'm going to try adding brushed, and we'll see how this works. As a bump. So again, I'm going to double click that, hit C. Notice the texture is not even doing anything because it's so big. I think that's way too big. There we go. Notice the way that it's kind of weaving sort of weird. That's because you need to adjust the mapping type. So this is the way that the texture is wrapping on that object. So if I do planar, there we go. That's more what I wanted. So planar gets it to wrap around like so. If I do C, I'll zoom in there. You can see how that's coming through now a little bit more clearly now. Attach that to color. It gives that more, brings that color and mixes it with the silver a bit more. But I don't really like the way that that looks at the moment. I need to change the color of this to something, I don't know what makes sense. Does red make sense? Yeah, kinda. Sure, we'll go with red. Go back to my bump here. Bump height. I might make this the scale of this a little bit bigger. And for the grooves, what happens if I change that to 2, 5? Yeah, it's interesting. Length 5. A little more interesting there. Variation. Add some grain to it. Maybe some distortion. Just give it some imperfections on the surface there. And other thing I want to do is just right click that. And again, I'm going to add in another bump just because I want to disturb this a little bit more because it still looks a little bit too smooth. So I'm going to do that. Add in another texture. This time I'm going to do the fractal noise. Add that in. Bring the scale on that way down. Okay. Anything else I want to do to that? Might make it a little bit finer. There we go. Just give it like a little bit of a something going on. So again, point being, obviously there's a time and a place to be trying to make stuff look super, super, super realistic. In this case, I'm just playing around with these, kind of seeing how I can make these look. Would it actually look like this? Who knows? No idea what this thing would actually be made out of. But for now, that's kind of the changes that I wanted to do to that. I could add roughness in on top of all that if I really wanted to. Make it super not rough. That's very interesting. How about just 1 on the... Oh, that's a lot of roughness. 0.1. Yeah, that'll do. Okay, we will run with that. Let's go ahead and move to our next one. Go ahead and show the spray top. We can go ahead and show the straw anyways. And I'll go ahead and take that one. Material graph. And we'll go ahead and make this one close to the bottom one as well. We're kind of going to make this one its own thing in a little bit. So bright red, as it were. And what else can we do? Just go with our normal noise texture. Add that in there, hit C. Scale that BOI way down. Interesting, I don't love that. How about adding in? No. I kind of like the brushed idea, but trying to get it to move the opposite direction. So we'll try to do planar, and then we'll try to rotate it 90 degrees. Yeah, kinda. How does that translate? Interesting. What about cylinder? Not quite. Sphere, really not quite. UV, no. So probably gonna have to stick with box. Or sorry, not box. Planar. Oh, there we go. That looks interesting. What about or smaller? Yeah, let's run with that. Try to make it stand out a bit. Have higher contrast. I like. I don't like the color though. What if I try to match this with the gold? Yeah, that's interesting. Sure, let's do that. Let's get in nice and close. See if we can get this a little bit closer to that color. Looks decent. And what else do I want to do to this? I think that's all I'll do on this particular case. So anything that I'm looking at now that I might want to change, first of all, the liquid, the color of it. Thinking, no. I kind of hate it, but we're gonna roll with it. Something more like that. Okie doke. Well, that's something. Anyways, so for the most part, that's kind of what I would want you guys to do, is just to take your materials, play around with this. Obviously, you don't have to put your logo that you get here. You can put it wherever you want. You can put it on this side. You could have 2 logos. You can do whatever you want. Main thing being, you need to take this model, slap a label on it, make it your own, play around with the materials, go crazy, and see what kind of cool different textures and things that you can come up with. If for some reason that you would like to dig a little deeper, you are more than welcome to look up specific tutorials on how to do certain kinds of materials. But for now, just kind of giving you the basic understanding of how the materials work, just showing you a little bit of how we use the material graph. And again, there's plenty of stuff out there that's more in depth. Just check those out. And yeah, have fun messing around with it. When you're all done, just hit the render button. Make sure you know where you're saving your stuff out to. I usually just do 99 quality JPEGs, resolution, whatever your work screen is usually fine. And then under your options, I usually just go by time, and then I would say at a minimum, you should let it render for, I guess it does depend on the computer that you have, but at a minimum, most of your stuff that you're turning in for exercises should be like 30 minutes or so. And then when you get to our bigger project stuff, probably letting those go for a few hours. So I usually just go by maximum time, do about 30 minutes, and then let it render out. So just compose it however you like, get a nice picture of it, and then submit those JPEGs to the Dropbox. I don't need the BIP files this time. I think it'll just be interesting enough looking at the materials and seeing how you did it without worrying about the back end. And if for some reason I'm super curious about how you did something, I might ask to take a look at it later. But for now, just submitting the JPEGs from your renders. And I would like you guys to at least submit probably 3 renders just to kind of get try to get some close-ups of some of the textures and details and stuff that you guys do on these. And yeah, just make it interesting. So that's all we're covering for this week. Play around with materials, and we'll worry about the rest of it as we continue along. All right, have a good week.